Darcy, James Argy, it's a pleasure to meet you. How did you come to play the Jazz Composers Forum here?
Well, I got an invitation from Pedro, who founded the OJM many years ago, and he just emailed me, I think sometime last year, and mentioned that this was in the works, and that he had these great guests lined up, and Jeremiah Klein was going to do it, and Florian Ross, and there would be kind of a showcase of North American composers and European-based composers with an emphasis on contemporary music for a jazz ensemble, with composers who are doing something unique and different with the instrumentation. And so I had met Pedro and Carlos very briefly when the band was in New York backing Kurt Rosenwinkel, and I'd heard that album, and I knew that they were a really great group, and so it was really, I was first very excited and honored to get the call, and when we were able to work out the dates and work out the rehearsal situation, then I was very pleased to say yes, and it's an honor to come here and close it out after so many great concerts by so many great composers.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've got the honour of being the youngest composer as well. Makes you feel good straight away.
I didn't know that actually, but sure.
And is jazz always evolving for yourself as well? So you're the youngest, but in your head everything evolves in jazz.
Well, that's the spirit of the music and the tradition of the music. I mean, sometimes I get grief from people who call themselves like jazz traditionalists, but to me, like the people who want to keep things a certain way and keep things rooted in the past, those are the people who are not being respectful of the tradition. The tradition has changed. The tradition is, development, and for musicians and improvisers and composers to take and build on what's come before, and to take the music in different and personal directions. So I've never really understood the criticism that you have a heavy metal thing here, or you have like a rock beat, and that's that's not respectful to the tradition. It's like, well, but the tradition has changed, and the tradition is finding ways to take those elements and make them work in a context of jazz improvisation, and to borrow steel purloin elements from outside of jazz and try to bring them in an organic way, and in a way that feels integrated with at least what I'm trying to do as a composer. And that's always been the tradition from Jelly Roll Morton onwards. Jazz musicians have always found sounds from the world outside of the narrow parameters of whatever the jazz of the day is, and they would bring it in. And so it's always been about people with big open ears bringing in different elements.
I mean, you played trumpet at the school of jazz band, studied piano, university, became interested in the orchestration side of things. How far along the jazz journey, as it were, are you right now?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know where it ends.
Yeah.
Yes.
From the same place.
Oh, great. He was open.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Well, about 8 years ago, you formed the Darcy James Argy's Secret Society, 18-piece steampunk band. I love that phrase. How would you quantify that yourself, steampunk?
Well, the steampunk thing, it was, it started as something fairly whimsical. I was just building the MySpace page for the band back when MySpace was a thing, and there's a field that you have to fill out describing what your music sounds like. And so I put sounds like, I don't know, steampunk big band, and I hadn't really I hadn't intended it to take on this kind of like epic proportions that it has, because there are people who there are bands and there are sort of people in fashion and people who like sort of live a steampunk lifestyle much more to an extent than I ever have. You know, it's a real community with some very hardcore devotees, and I'm not a part of that community necessarily. But what appealed to me about that that community and that strain of literature, and I guess I should say that steampunk really started as a type of literature that, you know, of science fiction that deals with the technology of the past and projects that into the future, especially sort of Victorian era technology of like the external combustion engine and clockwork and sort of visible means of production in terms of the technology. And it's a view of the future through the eyes of a previous generation, through the eyes of sort of the late 19th century. It's really inspired by Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, and it's a way for writers like, you know, William Gibson and Michael Moorcock and Alan Moore and all kinds of you know, authors to comment on the present using this using the past as kind of a filter and using this sort of imagined future that took a different route to comment on where we are now. And what appealed to me about that was this sense of sort of anachronistic modernism, of taking, you know, having sort of modern devices built with archaic technology. And it seemed to me that there was like an obvious parallel with what I was trying to do with the jazz big band, to take this very old-fashioned, outmoded type of music technology, the jazz big band, which had its heyday in the 30s and 40s and then went away, and to take that and to repurpose it and refashion it and kind of hack it a little bit and make it do stuff, all kinds of stuff it wasn't originally designed to do. So that was the impetus for what was, as I said, sort of a whimsical little in-joke, steampunk big band on my MySpace page. But the thinking behind it is actually, I thought it was a nice way to encapsulate what I was trying to do musically with my band, Secret Society.
If there was a film that could almost sum it up off your head straight away, is there one that you know?
A film?
Yeah.
No, there hasn't been a really good steampunk movie, and I don't know that there will be. There's been a terrible one, which was the film they made of Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Right.
But of course, the original League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comic book by Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill, the first 2 volumes are really outstanding, and that certainly played a role in my thinking about sort of the steampunk literary scene and graphic novel scene, and that definitely informed how I thought about, you know, putting together Secret Society. I understand they're now developing a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen television series. Who knows whether that will be any good, but obviously there's not a great track record of adapting Alan Moore properties to film or TV.
Yeah. But I mean, the first album, Infernal Machines, is a real complex blend of instruments, effects, loops, grooves. The idea behind it, what was it? Sign out.
Well, you know, as I said, it was really taking this old school music technology of people blowing through brass tubes and, you know, creating something contemporary sounding with it. And the album, like Infernal Machines, opens with a sound that is both very rustic and very futuristic. The instrument is a cajon, which is Afro-Peruvian instrument, an Afro-Peruvian drum, and it's really like the simplest possible musical instrument you can imagine. It's a box with a hole in it and a snare, and that's it. Like, that's all it is. You know, it doesn't get any simpler. But it's processed electronically, and there's all of these delay effects and reverb effects and sort of envelope filters and things going in and out of the stereo. And so, you know, I wanted from the very beginning, first off, to open the album with a sound that you wouldn't necessarily expect when you were putting on a big band jazz record. and also to have a sound that kind of was a sort of a philosophical mission statement for the album of like taking something like really kind of earthy and rustic and old-fashioned and pairing it with contemporary digital processing technology to create this kind of hybrid sound. And for the rest of the album, there's songs, sort of each of the pieces is there's a little epigram in the program notes, basically about Phobos and Transit and Zeno, and the genesis of each of these pieces is sort of alluded to a little bit using other people's words rather than my own, because I wanted there to be just enough of a suggestion of something to get people thinking along the lines. I mean, it's important for me for a piece like Jacobin Club or Habeas Corpus for people to understand the historical background that informs those pieces, but I also didn't want to pen a whole essay about them. I really wanted to just have a little brief, just enough to plant the seed in the minds of the listener and let them do the work of listening to the piece and working out the associations on their own and figuring out what it means to them.
I mean, you cited sort of Bob Brookmeyer, Marie Schneider as influences, and it's said that your inspiration can be drawn from anywhere between Radiohead and Charles Mingus, in a way. But what influences you on a daily basis?
Well, it really varies, and this new piece that we're going to be premiering at tonight's concert, this piece, All In, and now it's a piece that I ended up dedicating to the late Laurie Frink, who just very recently passed and was the #1 lead trumpet player in New York for a few years, and then she sort of retired from lead playing but still did a lot of section playing, but became probably the most influential trumpet teacher of all time, and counted among her students pretty much anyone in New York who played the trumpet, including people like Dave Douglas and younger musicians like Ambrose Akim Missouri, and it's really like astounding the influence that Laurie has had, and she played on Infernal Machines, and she played with us when we performed at Newport in for the first time, and so I did. I sort of dedicated this piece to her, but it started earlier, and it started from a different place. And when I found out that she passed, it seemed sort of appropriate that, okay, well, like we'll make this a dedication to Laurie. But from a technical point of view, it started just with me figuring out some things about this specific sort of type of interval called the all-interval tetrachord. And it has sort of fascinating properties. Basically what it is 4 notes that have all of the 12 intervals contained within them. And there's just 2 of them, and there's sort of 2 individual 4-note groups that have all 12 intervals embedded within them. And they have a very special sound, and so that piece started really as like a technical exploration of that, and then evolved to a point where I felt good enough about the emotional content of the piece that it seemed like it would be okay if I dedicated it to Laurie's memory. It seemed like, all right, well, this has, it starts from a real very intellectual place, but as I'm writing it, I'm hoping that the emotion of it comes through, and I think it seems to be coming through well enough. We'll see how we do tonight.
Yeah, how's it working with the OGM? This orchestra here, or all the orchestras you've worked with in the past?
Well, it's been really great to have a very concentrated period of rehearsal. So we've been doing, basically 6 hours a day for the past 3 days, and and they also had the music in advance, and I know the players did a lot of homework in preparation for me coming here. And they're also in very good shape, having done all of these other composers and had to navigate all of the incredibly difficult music that people like Guillermo write and people like Ohad Talmor write. And so I think they're in fine form at this point, if perhaps a little tired, closing in on the last concert of this series. But the spirit has been really great. 6-hour rehearsals can be really draining at the best of times. And when you go in and work with a new group, you're never really sure what the dynamic is going to be. But the players here are all very positive and in it for the music, which is all you can ask for.
Definitely. So Grammy nominated, 3 Rising Star Awards, Charlie Parker Jazz Composers Prize, critically acclaimed albums. What does the future hold for Darcy James Harvey?
Well, I'm always just looking for more opportunities to get my music out there and to perform for new audiences. And this is why this concert tonight is such a great opportunity, because it would be impossible for me to bring my big band to Porto. Just financially, that would be completely unrealistic. And so it's amazing that there's a band here that is dedicated to contemporary jazz, and so dedicated to it that they have a whole series of 8 composers, and they're planning on doing this every couple of years. And it allows me first an opportunity to work with new groups of musicians, and to I always hear something new in my music every time I hear it performed by a different ensemble, and that keeps it fresh for me, keeps it interesting for me. And I look forward for more opportunities like this to work with with existing big bands, and to take Secret Society on the road to different places. Last year we were able to bring the band down to Brazil, which was fantastic. Really an amazing experience, and I'm hoping I'll be able to take the band on the road again next summer. We'll see where it goes from there. But really, I think if you ask any musician, they just want more opportunities to play.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Brooklyn Babylon was another blend of styles: progressive jazz, Balkan folk music, dance, punk, indie rock, waltzes, marches, carousel music. If nothing else, you know how to sort of mix it up. Are you always looking for some sort of fusion? I know that word is used a lot, but...
Sure. Well, it's sort of there's some people who have made it a dirty word in jazz, but it really ought not to be, and it's not like, again, it's not like, people bringing rock rhythms into jazz in the late 60s. It's not like that was without precedent. People have been bringing Afro-Cuban rhythms into jazz and Brazilian rhythms into jazz, and it's something that has always been part of the tradition, and something that I really value, because jazz musicians are curious folk, and they travel the world and get to experience other musical cultures and get excited about that. I want to bring that into the music. And for Brooklyn Babylon, I've just really tried to infuse that piece with everything I love about the musical culture in Brooklyn, sort of past, present, and future. And so part of that was, there's a whole community of mainly jazz musicians who play sort of Balkan-influenced groove music. There's a band, an amazing band, Slavic Soul Party, that have a regular gig at this venue, Barbas in Brooklyn, and it's great, because it's like party music but on brass instruments and like in crazy time signatures. And there was like this dance punk revival with bands like LCD Sound System and Chick Chick Chick, and like really bringing sort of a 70s disco rhythms and merging them with like a real kind of punk rock new wave attitude, and bringing in contemporary kind of technology and sort of like a hip hop sensibility, and creating this like new, like really infectious and gritty groove music that really appealed to me. And so I wanted to bring some of that in there, and a lot of what the album Brooklyn Babylon and Infernal Machines were both released by this label, New Amsterdam Records, which is primarily a sort of contemporary classical music label. And a lot of the other composers on that label, the kind of things that they are doing, I find also really inspiring and influential. So composers like Judd Greenstein and Missy Mazzoli and Corey Dargle, their approach to making what they do feel contemporary and feel like it has some relevance to the broader culture. I mean, that's a challenge that both jazz and classical music have had to face, of trying to make a case for the music we make as being current and vital and meaningful to the broader musical culture. And I think the New Amsterdam stable of composers, I know I am biased, but I think they're doing a really good job of threading that particular needle. And so there's certainly a lot of the music on Brooklyn Babylon is influenced by what I guess my distinguished peers on the other side of the jazz-classical divide have been doing recently.
What do you listen to when you go home, just to relax, put the stereo on? What do you play?
Well, it's really variable, and you know what? I often find it difficult to listen to recorded music while I'm working. Obviously not while I'm literally working on a piece, but even when I'm not sitting in front of the piano working on a piece and I'm just washing dishes or whatever, often I'll either have no music at all, or like maybe some talk radio or something, or some podcasts, because even when I'm not sitting at the piano composing, I'm still kind of, things are percolating in the back of my head, and it's easy to disrupt that. But I'm really looking forward. I've been sort of chasing one deadline after another since about January, and this piece that we're premiering tonight was, again, like a real kind of last-minute scramble to the finish line. And I'm looking forward to, in August, having a bit of a break, at least maybe a couple of weeks, where I might be able to go out and hear a bunch of live music and listen more to recorded music, and kind of, refill the tank a little bit. But often when I'm really busy working on my own music, I find it difficult to check out a lot of other stuff. But I have heard. I think the last record that I heard that really blew me away was the Jonathan Finlayson's debut, and he's been a trumpet player on the New York scene for a really long time, and a long time Steve Coleman associate, and he's waited. He could have made his first record at any time, probably in the last 10 years, but I think he really sort of waited until he was really ready to put out something that was very strong, and I think it's a phenomenal debut.
Thanks a lot for your time. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to see the show tonight. But for somebody from Music News that is just getting into for the first time, what 3 pieces would you say of your history would you choose they've got to check out?
Oh wow! I really hesitate to make recommendations. That's like choosing among your favorite children. So I would say that the pieces that seem to have at least generated the most response in terms of other ensembles programming them and recording and playing them, college groups and other big bands. I think the ones that people tend to gravitate towards are Transit, Obsidian Flow, and Red Eye.
Fantastic. The last question, what does jazz mean to you?
Well, I think, obviously that's a very broad question, but I think, the things that I've been saying about the possibility of a real genuine synthesis and the ability to take a variety of music from a variety of different influences and sources and synthesize it in a way that doesn't sound staged and doesn't sound sort of like mannered. It's something that jazz musicians have historically been really strong at, and because there's sort of the combination of instrumental virtuosity and being able to just execute at a very high technical level, but also a real command of rhythmic authority and a respect for groove and a respect for the difficulty of just playing 4 good quarter notes in a row, which is something that again the classical music world is not always hip to, although they're getting there. So I think that sort of combination of having a command of groove and having a command of instrumental technique makes jazz musicians kind of uniquely situated to be able to absorb a lot of different influences and be able to synthesize them and put them out in a way that is fresh and surprising and improvisatory and I think relevant to where something that I think a lot of musicians outside of jazz could really, it's sort of it flows both ways. There's jazz musicians who are really interested in incorporating elements from other musics that excite them. But I think also the synthesis that jazz musicians have created is a really strong thing and kind of points the way forward for a lot of different music. And I think you see that in the music of artists who are aware of what's going on in jazz. I think it really strengthens what they do, even if they're working in other disciplines.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks a lot. I'm really looking forward to tonight. I can't wait.